This morning, Nick Reiner remains behind bars without bail after making his first court appearance since being charged with the double murder of his parents, famed director Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle. Reiner, who was shackled.
The Reiner name doesn't land softly in Hollywood. It lands like a gavel. For decades, it has meant moral certainty, sharp opinions, and a public willingness to say the hard part out loud. It's the kind of name that comes with a built-in narrative. Principled, outspoken, unafraid of confrontation. So when that same name suddenly showed up in a courtroom context, the reaction wasn't casual curiosity. It was whiplash. Nick Reiner, Rob Reiner's son, appearing in court. Those words carry a strange electricity because they collide two realities that usually stay separated: the curated world of legacy and the uncurated world of legal process. One is built on stories people choose to tell, the other is built on records people don't get to rewrite, and the timing made it even more jarring. Because before Nick Reiner's court appearance, Rob Reiner's family released an emotional statement, carefully worded, restrained, and unmistakably serious. In a culture where celebrity families often default to silence, that choice stood out. Not because it was loud, but because it was deliberate. The statement didn't read like a press release designed to handle the situation. It didn't sound like a denial disguised as a plea for privacy. It acknowledged pain. It acknowledged impact. And it signaled in plain human language that something heavy had entered the family's life and was not going to be solved with a single headline. That's what made people lean in. Because when a family known for public conviction speaks with quiet emotion, it suggests a line has been crossed. Maybe not legally, maybe not publicly, but internally. The kind of line that changes dinner conversations, the kind that turns a phone call into a long silence, the kind that forces parents, siblings, and loved ones to confront reality without the comfort of distance. Then came the courtroom. No red carpet, no flattering lighting, no second take, just a building designed for consequences. Witnesses describe the scene as controlled and procedural, but emotionally dense. That kind of tension doesn't require shouting. It's the tension you feel when everyone in the room understands that what happens next will echo. Even if the hearing is brief, even if the moment is technical, even if nothing dramatic occurs on the surface. Because court isn't theater. It's a mechanism, and mechanisms don't care about legacy. They don't care about who your father is. They don't care what your last name is meant to strangers. They care about what happened, what can be proven, and what happens next. That's why this story hit so hard. Not because it involved famous people, but because it exposed a truth most families understand. The most destabilizing crises don't arrive with a soundtrack. They arrive with paperwork. They arrive with deadlines. They arrive with the quiet realization that life has shifted, and you can't shift it back. And for the Reiner family, that shift wasn't just private. It was public. In a world where everyone has an opinion within minutes, the question isn't just what happened. The question becomes, what does this mean? What does it mean for Nick Reiner? For Rob Reiner? For a family that has been associated, fairly or not, with the idea of accountability. Because there's one thing courtrooms do better than any talk show, any social media thread, any Hollywood panel: they remove the mask, and that is what makes the beginning of the story so uncomfortable. Rob Reiner has spent years arguing that accountability matters, not as a slogan, but as a posture. He's been vocal about responsibility in public life, about consequences for wrongdoing, about the idea that power should not be a shield. Whether people agree with him or not, the brand has been consistent. Say what you believe, and don't flinch. Which is why this moment, Nick Reiner in court, preceded by an emotional family statement, creates a new kind of tension. Because this isn't a debate about policies or ideology. This isn't a public figure criticizing someone else's choices. This is a family facing a problem that can't be solved with an argument. It's one thing to speak about accountability when it's abstract. It's another thing when it's your child. And that is the central pressure point here. Families, especially high-profile ones, often face a brutal contradiction. Love is expected to be unconditional, but accountability is expected to be visible. The public wants both immediately in perfect balance. They want a family to defend their own, but not too much. They want a family to condemn wrongdoing, but not too harshly. They want certainty, clarity, and moral theater without considering that the people involved are living in uncertainty, confusion, and fear. The Reiner family statement matters because it appears to refuse the easy version of the story. It doesn't turn Nick into a cartoon villain. It doesn't turn him into a helpless victim. Instead, it acknowledges the emotional reality that a situation exists, that it has impact, and that the family is grappling with it. That may not satisfy people who crave details, but it signals something more mature than satisfaction. Seriousness. And seriousness is often the first thing celebrity narratives lose. Hollywood trains people to manage perceptions. The instinct is to shape the story, to frame the context, to control the angles. But legal reality doesn't follow Hollywood rules. Legal reality is slow. It's procedural. It's built on patience and documentation, not vibes and momentum. So when Nick Reiner shows up in court, it becomes a moment where the usual protection, fame, relationships, image, doesn't automatically apply. Even if you have resources, even if you have lawyers, even if you have people who care about you, the process still moves. And that process does something psychologically brutal. It separates the individual from the myth. If you grow up in the shadow of a famous name, you inherit two things at once: opportunity and expectation. People assume you've had a head start. People assume you're protected. People assume you're privileged in ways they can't imagine. Sometimes that's true, but what people miss is the other inheritance. Pressure to represent something, pressure to be worthy of the name, pressure to avoid mistakes that ordinary people are allowed to make quietly. When that pressure meets a crisis, it can fracture a person. And when that crisis becomes public, it fractures the family too. Because families are not machines. They are networks of loyalty, history, resentment, love, disappointment, and hope. When a legal situation enters that network, it rearranges everything. Siblings take sides silently. Parents replay old moments in their minds, searching for the first sign they missed. Partners question what they knew and when. Conversations become careful. Text messages become evidence. And that's before we even get to the public. The public doesn't just watch, it interprets. It turns restraint into guilt and silence into strategy. It assumes that any statement is a confession and any lack of statement is a cover-up. It wants a clean story with a villain, a victim, and a lesson. But real life rarely gives us clean stories. Real life gives us complicated people. And whatever the underlying legal details are, the broader significance here is clear. This is a family navigating the collision between love and consequence in front of an audience that demands certainty. Nick Reiner's courtroom appearance by itself doesn't tell us the ending, but it tells us the genre. This is no longer a private family matter. It is now a public process. And public processes have a way of revealing truth that families would rather keep unspoken. Here's the part many people don't want to admit. Legacies are fragile. They feel permanent because they're built over decades, but they can be shaken by a single chapter that doesn't fit the narrative. And that's what makes a courtroom so threatening to a public legacy. It doesn't just judge actions. It drags context into the light. It forces timelines to be clarified. It demands that stories become statements that can be challenged. For the Reiner family, this moment is not just about legal procedure. It is about the cost of living under a banner of moral authority. Because when your public identity is rooted in accountability, people will look for consistency when it hurts. That doesn't mean the family owes the public every private detail. It doesn't mean a last name cancels the presumption of privacy, but it does mean that every response will be read as symbolic. If they speak, it will be analyzed. If they don't, it will be analyzed. If they show support, it will be framed as protection. If they emphasize accountability, it will be framed as abandonment. That is the trap of public life. You can't stop the interpretation machine. You can only decide what you refuse to feed it. The emotional statement suggests the family chose restraint over spectacle. That choice may be the most important detail we have right now because it indicates they understand the gravity. It suggests they are treating the situation not as content, not as a culture war moment, not as something to win, but as something to endure. Endurance is not glamorous. It is not neat. It is not easily summarized in a caption. Endurance is a series of hard days. It's the phone ringing again. It's the calendar filling with dates you didn't plan. It's the family member who doesn't respond to texts, not because they don't care, but because they don't know what to say. It's the slow realization that you can love someone and still be devastated by what they've done or what they're accused of doing. And that is why the courtroom matters. Because in that room, love is not a defense. Legacy is not a defense. History is not a defense. There is only the process. And the process keeps moving. For Nick Reiner, appearing in court is a moment of separation. Separation from the comfort of being perceived through the lens of his father's reputation. Separation from assumptions of protection. Separation from the idea that the family name can soften reality. In that separation, there is something brutal, but also something clarifying. It forces a person to confront who they are without borrowed meaning. And for any individual, famous or not, that confrontation can be life-altering. For Rob Reiner, the cost is different. It is the cost of being both a public moral voice and a private parent. It is the cost of knowing that whatever you say will be used as evidence by people who already decided what they want to believe. It is the cost of caring about accountability and principle and caring about your child in practice. Those two cares can coexist, but they don't always feel compatible. So what happens next? The truth is, we don't know the ending yet. Legal processes take time, and they should. The public will crave instant conclusions, but real accountability is rarely instant. It's procedural. It's contested. It's messy, but even without a final outcome, this moment has already revealed something important about how reality works when fame is involved. The spotlight doesn't just illuminate, it distorts. It makes everything look like a symbol. It turns pain into a story. And yet, behind the symbol is a family, a real family, a family that has to wake up in the morning and live through this regardless of what strangers say. That's what makes the emotional statement and the court appearance so significant together. They suggest a family trying to navigate the situation with sobriety rather than performance. They suggest a recognition that the only way through a hard chapter is to face it, not to spin it, not to bury it, not to distract from it. Because accountability, if it's real, is not something you demand only from other people. It's something you accept when it comes for you. And sometimes the hardest version of that acceptance is the one that happens at home. So as this case moves forward, remember what courtrooms are. Not a place for internet certainty, but a place for evidence. Not a place for rumor, but a place for records. Not a place for narrative control, but a place where the narrative has to survive cross-examination. The Reiner name is still the Reiner name, but the lesson of this moment is simple and uncomfortable. Names don't decide outcomes. Actions do. Evidence does, and consequences do. Nick Reiner's appearance in court, following a family statement that acknowledged pain instead of hiding from it, marks the point where the story stopped being about reputation and started being about reality. And reality doesn't care who you are. It only cares what happened. And notice what didn't happen. There was no parade of anonymous friends rushing to sell their version of the truth. There wasn't a glossy, perfectly staged photo meant to calm everyone down. There wasn't a dramatic, finger-pointing rebuttal aimed at shifting attention to someone else. If anything, the response felt almost old-fashioned, a family acknowledging that something serious exists and refusing to turn it into a spectacle. That restraint is precisely why the story grew. In the modern attention economy, silence is suspicious, and restraint is interpreted as strategy. People start filling gaps with guesses. Commentators begin speaking with confidence about details they don't have. Social media threads turn into courtrooms of their own, where the verdict is delivered first and the facts are requested later, if they're requested at all. And when the family statement landed, it landed in that environment. An environment that punishes nuance. An environment that hates the phrase, "we don't know yet." An environment that treats every pause as proof of guilt. So the statement became a kind of Rorschach test. To some, it read as responsible. To others, it read as evasive. To some, it sounded compassionate. To others, it sounded cold. That's what public life does. It turns human language into ammunition, and it turns family grief into content. But here's the uncomfortable truth. A carefully written statement is often what families do when they're trying to hold themselves together. Because when something turns legal, the rules of communication change overnight. You can't say what you want. You can't say what you feel. You say what is safe, what is accurate, and what won't make everything worse. That's not manipulation. That's survival. And then on the day of the court appearance, the symbolism was impossible to ignore. A son carrying a famous name walks into a place designed to be indifferent. A family releases a statement that feels like it's aimed inward as much as outward. And a public that loves certainty stares at a situation that refuses to be simplified. Ask yourself, how many famous families have been in this position and tried to pretend it wasn't happening? How many have hidden behind lawyers, publicists, and silence until the story died? How many have attacked accusers, attacked reporters, attacked cancel culture, attacked the system? Anything to avoid one simple act: acknowledging the pain that exists? Whether you admire Rob Reiner or criticize him, the family statement suggests they understood something basic. This moment was bigger than reputation management, because when your life intersects with the justice system, you don't get to control what the world sees. You only get to control what you are willing to face. This is where the public's appetite becomes dangerous. The public wants details. That's normal, but it often wants them for the wrong reason. Not to understand, but to judge. Not to learn, but to confirm what it already decided. That appetite creates pressure. Pressure on witnesses, pressure on families, pressure on everyone adjacent to the story. And pressure does two things. It distorts and it accelerates. It distorts because people begin to interpret ordinary legal steps as dramatic reveals. A scheduling change becomes a huge twist. A procedural filing becomes a secret bombshell. Even the simplest courtroom appearance can be framed as a definitive moment, when in reality it may be the start of a long timeline. And it accelerates because the internet cannot tolerate the pace of real accountability. Court moves slowly because it has to. It moves slowly because evidence must be tested, not just shared. It moves slowly because accusations aren't enough, they must be proven. But online, the speed is reversed. The conclusion comes first. The process is treated as an inconvenience. That mismatch between legal time and internet time is where families get torn apart. Imagine the conversations happening privately right now. Not performative conversations, not for the cameras, but raw ones. What did you know? When did you know it? Who should we call? Who can we trust? What do we say to relatives? What do we say to friends? What do we say to people who have already made up their minds? And then there's the hardest question of all. What do we say to each other? Because inside families, accountability is not abstract. It is not a talking point. It is a series of painful choices. Do you set boundaries? Do you insist on therapy? Do you demand honesty? Do you protect children in the family from details? Do you support without enabling? Do you hold someone close while also refusing to shield them from consequences? Those questions don't come with perfect answers. And in high-profile families, they come with an added poison. Every choice will be interpreted as a public statement, even when it's just a private survival tactic. Nick Reiner's presence in court is a reminder that the legal system is not built to heal families. It is built to decide responsibility. Healing, if it happens, must happen somewhere else. Quietly, slowly, without applause. That's why the emotional family statement is so significant. It hints at an awareness that this is not just a legal challenge, but a psychological and relational one. It suggests that the family understands the pain will not end simply because a court date passes. And it raises another uncomfortable question. What does accountability look like when the person involved is someone you love? For many people, that's the hardest moral test of their lives.